trial in the matter of Commonwealth versus Lindsay Clancy.
The Lindsay Clancy murder trial is officially underway.
One by one, she wrapped exercise bands around each one of the kids' necks and pulled until their little bodies were limp and lifeless.
The prosecution says she deliberately and knowingly murdered her 3 young children in cold blood, but the defense is firing back.
She's living her own hell. She knows what happened with those kids, and she wanted to die. And he knew when he brought this charge that it was going to kill the soul of this young woman.
Here's everything you need to know about this monumental trial so far. This is Scandal, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Gillespie. Dramatic opening statements presented in the trial of Lindsay Clancy, the Massachusetts mom accused of murdering her 3 young children in January 2023. There are so many unique things about this case, namely the fact that the defendant doesn't deny killing her kids. In fact, she admits she did it, but says it wasn't murder. Instead, she was in the throes of a rare and debilitating condition called postpartum psychosis. 3.5 years after her 3 young children were strangled to death, opening statements were finally presented in the case, and both sides did not hold back.
This was not a woman in the throes of psychosis on January 24th, 2023. This was a woman who acted intentionally, rationally, and swiftly to accomplish a very specific goal: to kill.
This is a woman that did not get the medication, did not get the medical treatment that she so deserved, didn't want to be resuscitated, wanted to die. To this day wants to die.
We're going to walk you through everything that happened this morning in opening statements, where both sides laid out what they say really happened on that fateful day in January 2023. But first, let's revisit the facts of the case as we know them right now. 35-year-old Lindsay Clancy is charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder in the 2023 deaths of her 3 young children. That's 5-year-old daughter Cora, 3-year-old son Dawson, and 8-month-old son Callan. At the time of their deaths, Lindsay and her then-husband Patrick were living in the upscale South Shore city of Duxbury, Massachusetts. On January 24th, 2023, Lindsay sent Patrick out of the house to pick up something from CVS and take out for dinner at a restaurant in nearby Plymouth, Massachusetts. While Patrick was out of the house, Lindsay reportedly used exercise bands to strangle each one of the children before cutting her wrists and neck, taking a host of prescription pills, and jumping out of a second-story window in an attempt to end her life. Lindsay didn't die, but she was permanently paralyzed from the waist down. Since that day in 2023, she's been in custody, but being treated at a hospital for her severe injuries. Last week, jury selection began for the case. Now, I was in Plymouth County at the courthouse where a jury of 12 women and 6 men were seated to make up a panel of 18 total jurors. That's 12 plus 6 alternates. And let me just say, it was difficult to seat a jury. I mean, this case has made national headlines for years at this point, not to mention the graphic details of the case that left some prospective jurors in tears during the voir dire. And that's why this case is getting so much national attention. While the details are heart-wrenching, the facts of the case also bring a larger question to the forefront. Was this truly a mental health break, or did Lindsay Clancy commit cold-blooded murder? The jury heard from both sides this morning, and I'll play out their arguments for you, but first, how court began.
Hear ye, hear ye, hear ye, all persons having anything to do before the Honorable William Sullivan, Justice of the Superior Court now sitting in Plymouth, within and for the Commonwealth. Draw an and give your attendance, and you shall be heard. God save the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. This court is now in session. Please be seated.
Good morning, Your Honor. May I proceed?
Yes, please.
Your Honor, before the court today, we have the jury trial in the matter of Commonwealth versus Lindsay Clancy.
Judge William F. Sullivan began by giving jurors a few instructions.
All right, so first, as you know, this is a criminal case, and the defendant was charged by the way of an indictment on 3 counts. All right, now, you have to understand that an indictment is not itself any evidence of the defendant's guilt whatsoever. It's merely the formal way of accusing a person of a crime in order to bring her here to this courtroom for trial. You are not to draw any inference of guilt from the indictments or from the fact that she was indicted and formally charged. There are two different degrees of murder. There's murder in the first degree and murder in the second degree. If you find the defendant guilty of murder, you shall decide the degree of murder. The Commonwealth alleges that the defendant committed murder in the first degree on the following theories: murder with deliberate premeditation and/or murder with extreme atrocity or cruelty. Now, to prove the defendant guilty of any crime, the Commonwealth must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant was criminally responsible at the time the alleged crime was committed. The Commonwealth bears the burden of proving beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant committed the crime with which she's charged, and also that the defendant is criminally responsible for her conduct.
I have to pause here for a brief explainer. Now, in all criminal cases, the burden of proof is on the prosecution. You've probably heard that a defendant is innocent until proven guilty. So it's up to the prosecution, in this case, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, to prove that. But there's an additional burden in this case. Lindsay's team is using the criminal responsibility defense. In some places, it's known as not guilty by reason of insanity, but it's called something different in Massachusetts. And here's how the Commonwealth statute explains it. It reads, quote, "If the Commonwealth has proved the elements of the offense beyond a reasonable doubt, the Commonwealth must also prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant was criminally responsible at the time of the alleged offense. Under the law, a person is not guilty if they lacked criminal responsibility when they committed the offense. This is sometimes referred to as not guilty by reason of insanity. There is no burden on the defendant to prove that they lacked criminal responsibility. That means there's zero burden on the defense to prove that Lindsay Clancy had a mental disease or defect. In fact, it's on the burden of the Commonwealth to prove that despite any sort of diagnosis, Lindsay Clancy was criminally responsible at the time of the alleged murders. And the judge made that very clear this morning to jurors.
The defendant has no burden to prove a lack of criminal responsibility. Criminal responsibility is a legal term. A person is not criminally responsible for her conduct if she has a mental disease or defect, and as a result of that mental disease or defect, lacks the substantial capacity either to appreciate the criminality or the wrongfulness of her conduct or to conform her conduct to the requirements of the law.
With all this in the back of their minds, jurors heard opening statements, and here's how the Commonwealth began.
Cora. She had just turned 5. She was sweet, silly, smart. She loved sparkly dresses and wearing bows in her hair. She loved princesses and baby dolls. She even tried to convince her preschool teachers at the beginning that her name was Sophia because she loved the Disney character Sophia the First so very much. Dawson. He was 3, a boy's boy. He was a bit rambunctious, but funny, full of energy. He loved trucks, construction trucks, fire trucks. And he spoke with a raspy little voice. Callan. Callan was just 8 months old. Always smiling with chunky cheeks, a sweet little baby. We are here, ladies and gentlemen, because they are not. They were strangled, deliberately and meticulously, killed by this defendant on January 24th of 2023. One by one, she wrapped exercise bands around each one of the kids' necks and pulled until their little bodies were limp and lifeless. First Dawson, then Cora, and finally Callan.
The prosecution explained the events of that day, noting that everything started out completely normal. Cora had a doctor's appointment in the morning, and after that, Lindsay played with her kids outside.
The defendant sent pictures of the snowman and the kids in the snow to Patrick when he was working in the basement, and her mom, who was living in Connecticut, who had just been there that weekend but had gone home. The day proceeds as normal. You'll hear Patrick describe it as a good day, actually.
But in the afternoon, the Commonwealth says there was a change in Lindsay.
In the late afternoon, around 4 p.m., the defendant searched on her phone for kids' Miralax, She searched takeout 3V, and she opened the Apple Maps on her phone and searched the route that it would take to get from their house to the 3V restaurant in Plymouth. She searched how much time and how far it was. Now, this restaurant had been a place that the family had eaten before, but wasn't their normal takeout spot. She also called CVS and asked them about the kids' Pedialyte or Miralax. And that's because at the doctor earlier that day, the doctor had recommended a laxative for Cora because she had some stomach issues. She had complained of an upset tummy at school the day before, you'll hear. She had some issues where she didn't like to go to the bathroom at school, a little bit embarrassed. So they suggested the Pedialyte. So she calls CVS and she confirms that they actually have it at their local CVS in Kingston. Then she sends a text to Patrick and asks if he wants to get takeout, if 3V is okay. She didn't feel like cooking dinner, it was a long day. He says, sure. She calls in the order. When Patrick leaves the house around 5:15 that evening, everything is normal, seems normal.
This is really important because the Commonwealth alleges Lindsay Clancy was premeditated in these 3 alleged murders. They say she measured out the distance from her home in Duxbury to the restaurant in Plymouth and to the CVS so that she would know exactly how long Patrick would be away.
That's when the clock starts, ladies and gentlemen. The defendant knows that Patrick has to stop at CVS, go to 3V. She knows that it's about 5 miles from their house to get to the restaurant. She knows approximately how much time she has for him to go there and come back. She then takes the children down into the basement. She separates Dawson from Cora and Callan, and then she proceeds to wrap exercise bands around each child's neck and pull until they are dead. She leaves the bands wrapped around each child's neck and goes back upstairs. In the kitchen, she gets a knife, and then she proceeds to the second floor of the home. In the middle of this, she misses a call from Patrick. He's at CVS. She misses the call. She calls him right back, and they talk for 14 seconds. Nothing that she does or says in that phone call is of concern to Patrick. He proceeds on his task, and she proceeds with hers. She goes to the second floor master bedroom, locks the door, crushes up some pills, and attempts to take her own life. She uses the knife she got in the kitchen to slash her wrists and her neck. She moves the bed away from the wall, away from the window. She opens that window and goes out. She lands on the cold, hard ground.
This is really hard to hear. The prosecution describes Patrick returning home to a chilling scene.
When he finds each child with an exercise band still wrapped around their neck, he screams for help, and he says he killed the kids. Efforts made to resuscitate Cora and Dawson were futile, but first responders from Duxbury and the surrounding communities were persistent, and they kept trying to resuscitate them all the way to the hospital. But when they arrived at the hospital, there was nothing more that medical staff could do for Cora and Dawson. The staff at Beth Israel were able to get a heartbeat on Callan, but he never started breathing on his own. He never regained consciousness.
According to the Commonwealth's theory, Lindsay was not suffering from postpartum psychosis. In fact, they called her, quote, controlling, meticulous, and manipulative.
And in efforts to maintain control, she withheld information from her husband, from her doctors. She reported serious symptoms that were inconsistent with her daily activities, you'll hear. And ultimately, on January 24th, 2023, the defendant made a calculated decision. This was a woman who no longer liked the life she thought she wanted. It was getting harder and harder to control. And when she saw the opportunity to escape, she made the selfish choice to take it, and to take Cora, Dawson, and Callan first before attempting to take her own life. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not a public debate about women's mental health and how the medical system treats women. This case is about this defendant, Lindsay Clancy. There is no dispute that she was dealing with mental health issues during this time period prior to the murders. There'll be medical records, medical doctors, mental health professionals that will talk about treatment, prescriptions, hospital visits. All that's going to be before you. The evidence will show that this defendant had a means and access to mental health that most people don't. And she chose to deal with her mental health issues in the worst way. She chose to manipulate her providers, seek out the quick and easy fix when she was feeling depressed and anxious. And when she didn't get what she expected, she chose an alternate route. She sought a different doctor. She changed medications after days. She disengaged from treatment when she didn't like the plan. After only 4 months in treatment, she made a choice, a deliberate and intentional decision that she did not want to try anymore. And because no one could take care of her kids the way she wanted them to, she had to take them with her. Despite all the precision that she exhibited that day, you'll hear, the timing of it all, the swiftness of the killings, overcoming the interruption of Patrick's phone call, what she did not anticipate was that she would not be able to complete the act by killing herself.
And here's how the Commonwealth ended its opening.
The fact that someone may suffer or have a mental illness, a mental disease or defect, is not the end of the inquiry when it comes to guilt or innocence. It is whether a person can appreciate the wrongfulness or criminality of the conduct and conform their conduct to the law. Do they know what they were doing, and can they control their actions? The evidence in this case will prove beyond a reasonable doubt that this defendant coldly and efficiently executed first Dawson, then Cora, and finally Callan. One by one, she strangled the life out of each one of them. She did so with no hesitation, with deliberate premeditation, and extreme atrocity and cruelty. She is criminally responsible for the murders because the evidence will prove to you that she knew exactly what she was doing. She drew her husband out of the house, their father, so that she had the opportunity and the time to carry out these murders.
So you've heard the prosecution's side of things. Now for the defense. Attorney Kevin Reddington began by thanking the jury for their service, saying, "God bless you."
You people will never forget this case.
The defense has been steadfast with its view that murder charges shouldn't have ever been brought in the first place, and Reddington made that very clear today.
The government says that this is a situation, it's not a referendum on women's having babies and having postpartum psychosis, postpartum depression, but it sure as hell is. Because you're going to hear, consistent with what His Honor told you in the instructions, consistent with the obligation that the government has when they brought this charge, Tim Cruz, the DA, right in the front row, brought this charge. He knew, as did his office, the facts of this case. And he knew, when he brought this charge, that it was going to kill the soul of this young woman. And they would bring their evidence in front of a jury that she knows that she killed these children. We'll sit here, listen to their evidence, but I suggest to you that the issue for consideration is what was going on in that woman's mind. She didn't want to get rid of her kids because of her selfish life, as the government indicates. She loved those children right up to the time of their death.
The defense gave a preview of the case they'll likely bring, that Lindsay Clancy was over-medicated, and that played into this alleged psychosis.
One of the things that you don't do, which is taboo, is if you have somebody that's bipolar, you don't put them on an antidepressant, you don't put them on Zoloft, you don't put them on what's called an SSRI, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. It messes with your brain. You don't do that, but it was done in this case.
But according to the defense, Lindsay's symptoms were very real.
In this case, how many times we heard she faked the suicide. Faked the suicide. Little cuts, dinky little cuts, scratches, you'll hear, stated in the opening statement or time of the arraignment. That she asked for a lawyer. That's rich. You're going to hear evidence that she was in her bedroom after the horrific act in the basement, and that she was up in the bedroom, that she stood in front of a full-length mirror, that she took the knife that was in the kitchen that she had taken, and when she took the knife, she cut her throat in front of the mirror. This is no fake suicide. This is her when she was brought to the hospital. When she was in the hospital. That's what her appearance was at the South Shore Hospital.
Reddington showed the jury a very graphic photo of Lindsay in the hospital after she jumped from that second-story window. We decided not to show it to you because it's truly just too graphic. But he also showed jurors another photo that is once again too graphic for us to post. It showed a bloody knife that Lindsay used to slit her wrists. Alongside that knife was a cup with crushed up prescription pills that she ingested before her attempt. And that cup had the phrase, "because kids," written on it.
She's paralyzed. She's not going to get up miraculously and walk out of this courtroom. She's paralyzed and will be paralyzed for the rest of her life. She's living her own hell. She knows what happened with those kids, and she wanted to die.
The defense says that's because of a host of medications she'd been prescribed from doctors leading up to January 2023. Those medications include Zoloft, Ativan, Trazodone, Prozac, Ambien, Remeron, Klonopin, Seroquel, Valium, amitriptyline, and Lamictal. That's 11 prescriptions total. All the while, her defense says Lindsay was only getting 2 hours of sleep per night for months.
At this point, at the end of November, around Thanksgiving, she's reporting disassociation and confusion. They put her on Remeron. This is around Thanksgiving. Things were so bad at this point that her mother and father came up from Connecticut and lived with them to take care of the kids, to help, because she was walking around absolutely a zombie. She would rock on the sofa, crying hysterically, banging her head into the pillow of the sofa. Patrick will tell you what he observed with her. She dealt with her parents. Her parents were there to try to help. Is this someone that's faking because she doesn't want to be a mother anymore?
The defense ends its opening statement arguing Lindsay was failed by the system. They say she raised red flag after red flag, and still her cries for help went unanswered.
She told them that she was suicidal. She told them that she had suicidal ideation, and in December, to his and her ever dying regret, told Patrick in the presence of her mother that she was having psychosis, thoughts of hurting the children. This is a woman that did not get the medication, did not get the medical treatment that she so deserved. This is a woman that was suffering from psychosis at the time that she went down to that basement. She had no motive. She loved her children. She intended to kill herself. She didn't fake that. Threw herself out the window. Goes to the hospital. You're going to see that when she's in the hospital, they said to her, you want to, what do you call it, a DNR? Do not resuscitate or whatever. Absolutely. Did not want any DNR. Didn't want to be resuscitated, wanted to die. To this day wants to die. That's what we're dealing with on this prosecution. So you're going to hear from witnesses. It's going to be emotional. And Thank you for your service.
The first witness called by the Commonwealth was the most anticipated, the star witness, Patrick Clancy himself. At the time of this recording, he's still on the stand testifying. So make sure to check back here with Scandal, because I'll be breaking down his testimony in my next episode. But for now, that's where today's episode leaves us. If you like what you saw and you want to see more or connect with me on social media, you can find me on places like Instagram at Sierra Gillespie. Thanks for watching today's episode of Scandal. As always, I'm your host, Sierra Gillespie, and I'll see you next time.